We're going to continue on with the Passion Week. It's now Monday. Jesus and his 12 disciples had spent the night after his triumphal entrance into Jerusalem the day before. They went back up the same way they came down, spent the night in Bethany. Folks, I want you to understand Bethany means house of unripened figs, but it was a place where there were poor people, sick people, infirm people. Those people could not be in the presence or in the sight of Jerusalem. Bethany was just over the hillside, away out of view of the city. But that's where the lepers were, the infirm people. And I find it very interesting that Jesus, during his last week on planet Earth, could have stayed anywhere that he wanted to, but he decided to stay with the people that were suffering, hurt, sick. That's the Savior that we have, that we love, and that we're going to spend eternity with. Here it is Monday morning. He and his disciples get up, leave Bethany, come back over the top of the Mount of Olives, and there Jesus sees the fig tree. And it's early in the morning, and he's hungry. So he goes over to the fig tree, which is just blooming with leaves. It's just full of leaves, because a fig tree puts its leaf out first. Then it puts its fruit out to where the leaf can shade it from the hot sun there in Israel. And so Jesus goes over there and he parts the leaves of this fig tree to reach in to get some of those early figs that will be forming and are edible, but there's no figs there. And the problem with the fig tree, if there's no early figs, there's not going to be any late figs either. And then he curses the tree for not having any fruit. Folks, this is the beginning of a judgment, so to say. A judgment. As he judges the fig tree, he also is looking at Israel and judging them as well. Because he comes into the temple area, down from the Mount of Olives, across the Kidron Valley, up through the eastern gate, there into the temple, goes into the outer court, the court of the Gentiles, where there all the money changers are. What are they doing there? Well, folks, it's the feast of the Lord. When God throws a feast for himself and wants all the people of Israel to attend that feast, he expects them to bring lambs, expects them to bring a sacrifice. But a lot of the people, they have to journey the long way, so they don't bring any of their flocks with them for their sacrifice. And they come to the temple in order to buy a sacrifice, to buy something from the money changers themselves. Turtle doves, goat, oxen, you name it, it's all there. But the money changers are thieves, because there's different monies from all over the region where these people are coming, and where they want to exchange their currency of what they have, they overcharge them exuberantly. So really they are stealing from the people as they are trying to get their sacrifice. They're stealing their sacrifice to God. No wonder he's offended. And that's when Jesus takes the cords together and he starts overturning the money tables, and he starts lashing the people with those cords and says, this is my Father's house, and it will be called a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves. Folks, can you see the parallel now between the fig tree and the judgment of what Jesus is doing for the religious establishment at the time? They weren't helping the people. They had all their shiny robes on. They had all their ornaments on. They paraded around and showed about how pious they were. But they were just like the fig tree, full of leaves, but no fruit. And so we can see that judgment. Later that day, Jesus is in the temple, and they start asking him questions. And they ask him questions about, whose wife will this one be? Back in those days, if a man married a wife and didn't have any children, when the husband died, then that wife would marry the brother of her husband. And so they said, well, whose wife is she going to be at the resurrection? If the first husband dies and she has no children, the second one dies, The second brother dies and has no children. And the third one, all the way down to the seventh. Whose wife is she going to be in the resurrection? And Jesus said, at the resurrection, people would neither marry nor be given in marriage, but they will be like the angels in heaven. Folks, it's important to understand this, that there is no reproduction of angels. I know there's doctrines that have been taught about how angels mated with men and produced huge people, the people in the Genesis, but angels are not given in marriage nor married, and there is no sexual. They're eternal. And when we get into heaven, we also will be eternal. There will not be marriage. They ask him the greatest commandment. What is the greatest commandment? And it's basically Deuteronomy 6, to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second one is likened to this, to love thy neighbor as thyself. Folks, when we follow Christ, it's not about us. It's about literally everyone around us. And that's what it was with the life of Jesus. It wasn't about him. Though he was the Son of God, he made it about everybody else, including this whole week as he's teaching the truth of the Gospels. There were other parables that he spoke and other things that he said. But I also want you to understand, on this day, which was Nisan 10, it goes all the way back to Exodus 12 and 3, when the Lord said, take up a lamb and keep it up, because on the Passover, you're going to be consuming the lamb. Folks, this was the day that Jesus was literally being taken up, a lamb without blemish, without spot, and he was being questioned and he was being inspected, just like the sacrificial lamb that would have been offered at Passover later that week.